Our numbers have been increasing over the last few weeks, and it shows that people are getting better and they're able to be healthy enough to be able to assemble. And I know we're all grateful that that is true. And it's good to see everyone here this morning, and we want to talk about distractions for just a moment and to think about focus. For the next 4 lessons, we're having our services on Sunday morning, and we'll have a service like we do on Sunday night. We don't serve the Lord's Supper on Wednesday night, but on Wednesday night we'll have another service. So the next 4 sermons I'm going to preach are dealing with the idea of what our focus should be. I'm sure that we have experienced distractions while driving down the highway. I'm amazed that people can have a hamburger in one hand, French fries in the other one, and somehow holding the steering wheel and shifting the car. And they think, well, I'm not distracted. I'm a multitasker. That's our new thing. That's wonderful to be able to do. But I've seen people stay a long time at stoplights because they're looking at their cell phone. They're not focused on driving. They're focused on a phone. It's a distraction. People can walk across our peripheral vision while we're driving, and they're strange looking, and you'll be distracted. We have to always admit that we can be distracted. But what's more important is our life as a Christian. We are to be walking in the way of righteousness. We are to be living a life that is focused upon a holy God that we would reverence or worshiping today. And then our whole life is focused upon being a Christian. Those of us who have named the name of Christ, that's who we are. And our life needs to be focused upon things that are true to God's character and stay focused and not be distracted by things. I think you'll have to admit to me that this year of 2020 has been something of a distraction in our lives. Now, I'm not saying that it's distracted you from being a Christian. I'm saying it has been a distraction. It's a possibility that we've been distracted by tropical storms. There have been 12 named storms, 5 major hurricanes, 6 of them have come into the Gulf. 5 of them had hit Louisiana. That's not a distraction to you? Is my street going to be flooded on this one? Is this the one we catch it? Is it going to blow us away? We are distracted by those things. And when we think about those tropical storms and hurricanes, we ask ourselves the question, is God involved in that? God created things and he just let them go. Is he one that is not in power? We turn to Job, the 1st chapter, and Job, the 1st chapter and verse 9, Satan is responding to what God says. If you beheld Job, my servant, he is indeed a righteous man. And Job, in Job, we find that he doesn't know, he ever knows what this event is occurring here. But Satan is having a dialogue with God. And Satan says, you build a hedge around him. The reason his crops grow and increase is because your hand is with him. So God is there. Satan recognizes God is blessing him, and there is a hedge about him. But if you start taking stuff that affects him, Satan accuses men before God sometimes and say he'll curse you. And God gives him permission. And yet but Satan understands that this is indeed God that is allowing this to happen. And so what happens is that all of a sudden, there's word that comes back to Job that indeed the Sabaeans, while the donkeys were feeding beside the oxen, we find that they came and stole them and killed all the servants. I'm the only one that's left to come and tell you about it. Right on the heels of that, there is the word that the lightning from heaven, God from heaven, this fire struck from heaven, probably a lightning strike. It killed all the sheep. And I'm the only one that's left to come tell you about it. By the way, another one comes along and says the Chaldeans have separated themselves in 3 companies and they stole all the camels and killed all the servants, and I'm here to tell you about it. And by the way, there was a wind that came out of the wilderness. It struck the four corners of the house where your daughters and your sons were, and they're dead. Was God not involved in that? You don't read your Bible close enough to, if you say, well, he just let it go and let Satan do it. He could have said no. Is God in control? Is he there in the tropical storms? I say yes. And you'll see the reason why in a moment. What about elections? Has that gone the way you like? Oh, God is not a God that cares about politics. It's interesting in Mark the 8th chapter that he'll say, behold, the leaven of the Pharisees and Herod. Oh, we don't worry about Herod. He's just a political force there, and God cares about religious things. Beware of the leaven of Herod. There was a group called the Herodians, and they would be involved in helping kill Jesus. Beware of their leaven, their deceit, their hypocrisy. Yeah, there was a religious aspect of things, but he's also considering that God is involved in everything. And when we think about power and government, Nebuchadnezzar in Daniel, the 4th chapter, and verse 25, is a great example of that fact that God is involved in the kingdom of men. He didn't say I'm in particular kingdoms and that sort of thing, but the idea of the rule of men, God is involved with that. He just doesn't set that aside and say that you can't blame that on me, but he's involved with this. Now, we notice in Daniel, the 4th chapter, and verse 25, that here is a dream that is fulfilled, that indeed will be Nebuchadnezzar out eating grass like an oxen and the dew on his back. And he dreamed that dream. He didn't know, but Daniel interprets that. And so he says that thou shalt be driven from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. He'll kind of go crazy. Nebuchadnezzar will. And thou shalt be made to eat grass as oxen, and shall be wet with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth them to whomsoever he will. Look across your page. In verse 17, he rules in the kingdom of men and setteth up over it the lowest of men. You never thought he'd win that election. He'll put the lowest of men in place. Who's involved in doing that? It's God. And he rules in the kingdom of men. Do you think God's not involved in people of power that rule over the people, that he's just not interested in that? His hand is in everything. You'll see why in a moment. What about COVID-19? Has that been a distraction in your life? Wear a mask, not wear a mask? How long you quarantine? What's the best way to deal with things? We have been all over the page because that's affected our society. It's affected our health. And yet when we think about God, is he not having any part in this? When you think about breathing and coughing and all those things, when we think about James the 4th chapter and verse 15, God is involved in your everyday affairs of your life. Do we really believe the Bible? When we think, oh, God is not associated with all these things, these are our distractions, and yeah, you're distracted over that, but you still need to remain focused, because God is set forth here that you'll go and do what you plan to do, old man, only if God allows you to live. Only if God allows you to live, you'll be able to do this or do that. He's in power. The next breath I take, he's in power of saying yes or no. I know I'm speaking to people that don't know the group I'm getting ready to talk about, the police. I think you're going to have to be 45 years older, but I'll say it anyway. They had a hit song in 1983. Every breath you take, I'll be watching you. Every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every smile you fake. I think he's got a problem with his girlfriend, don't you? every claim you stake, I'll be watching you. Is that how we feel about God? He has no control, but he's watching you. Oh, that all-seeing eye, he's watching you. But see, we need to understand our focus should be on the sovereignty of God. And the sovereignty of God is that which possesses all authority, but power to act. Power to act. That's sovereignty. Over man, over disease, over storms, and over elections. God is sovereign over all. And the Bible is teaching that. Job recognized it. Back to Job, the first chapter. When he heard the news, what did he do? He shaved his head, he worshiped God, and he talked about a God who acts. God gaveth, and God taketh away. Blessed be the name of Jehovah. He didn't turn his back on God, said, God, I know you're there with me for religious times, and I'll worship you and that sort of thing, but this is life stuff. He knew God was in control, and he worshiped him. God gives, God takes away. See, he has the power to act. He took away the lives of the children. He allowed that to happen. He could have said no. But here's something different about God. I think people think, well, God, you're watching me every step that I take and every breath I take, I'll be watching you. Part of that song says, don't you see that my aching heart, because you belong to me, Sting says. You belong to me. My heart is aching. But see, he doesn't have the power to keep her. That's why he's bemoaning it. But I'll be watching you. Every step you take, I'll be watching you. Okay, I hear your threats, but you don't own me. You don't own me at all. God owns you. And we need to learn that he's not just there as an all-seeing eye, but he's a gracious God whose hand is in every facet of our lives. Because the sovereignty of God is the faith that we should have in our lives. I want to focus upon one man named Joseph. And we'll just cut to the end of the book of Genesis when all the events, well, we'll start back with Joseph as a 17-year-old man. By the time he gets through his wilderness of darkness, he'll be 30 years old when things start turning better. He's probably 41 years of age when all his family finally comes to be with him. In the last chapters, he's weeping with emotion because he's been separated from Benjamin. He's been separated from his father. He's there to see his father die, and he weeps some more. Full pent-up emotion in the last few chapters of Genesis. But one of the interesting statements that is made when the brothers meet him and they think it's not going to go well for them is that you meant evil against me, as he speaks to his brothers, but God meant it for good. Now, if you read that and you think, God, you overcame the evil, you're not reading it. God meant it for good. So with that in mind, can we take some snapshots of Joseph's life for a moment? I'll look at 3 of them with you. Let's take the snapshot of what Joseph might say, this is my reality right now. I have just been sold into Egypt for 20 pieces of silver by my brothers. That's a reality. It's not how I feel about it. But it is a reality in my life. And you could really say, yes, that's right. If you just took that moment shot, like we take a moment of COVID, we take a moment, bad elections, or good elections, glad we got that, whatever. or a tropical storm. Take this snapshot. Hold it, building up things and putting bags out, and we're distracted. We have to realize that this is what he had to go through. And that's exactly what happened. But there were some men, brethren, that in this section of Genesis 37, 18 through 24, they were involved in thinking of what they ought to do. The brothers hated him enough, they said, let's kill him. Reuben's got another plan. Reuben's plan is to say, well, no, we don't need to take him alive. Here's a pit over here. Let's put him in the pit. And see, Reuben's thinking, I'll come back later and get him. But Judah had a plan. And before Reuben would come back to get his brother out of a dry pit, seemed like that was kind of nice. He's just dry. I'll come get him. Judah said, let's sell him. Let's sell him. And the Ishmaelites come along, 20 pieces of silver, and they take him down to Egypt, and he sells it to Pharaoh as a servant. Stop right there. Take a picture. There's your life, Joseph. Do you deserve that? No. God, where are you? Oh, you're not anywhere. I'm on my own. It's not true. God's going to be with him every step he takes. Is this a wonderful reality moment for Joseph? Could he do some complaining? Could he be kind of questioning, where are you, God? I wouldn't fault him if he did. Would you? But see, he doesn't know yet that God meant it for good. My pain, God meant it for good. I need to get a hold of that. Well, we'll go a little bit further. Let's take another snapshot. Here's a young man living a life of holiness, even though he's in a foreign land. And he's standing up for living a life of righteousness, overcoming the sexual desires that would be in a young man. There's Potiphar's wife. And he lets her know real quickly that his master had given him all things related to the house, but you are his wife. But listen to it. You are his wife. How can I do this and sin against Potiphar? Yeah, you could make that point. He didn't say that. Sin against God. So here he is. God, don't you always tell us, flee fornication? You'll tell us that in the New Testament. Yeah. He did it. Left the garment in her hand, and she just laid it by her bed after she cried out, oh, this servant mocked me. She tells her husband, this servant you brought unto us mocked me. And here's his garment. He tried to rape me. Thank you. Bringing him into our house. All lies. Snapshot. Is this what a young man devoted to serving God with holy living? Does he deserve this? Where are you, God? They just threw me in jail for this lie. Are you there? He's with him every step of the way. God meant it for good. But Joseph is hurting. He interprets dreams. And there was the butler and the baker, and the butler goes first, and there's a vine with 3 branches. The 3 branches means, about 3 days, you're going to be crushing the grapes in the cup of Pharaoh. Going to be released. Well, the baker said, this is good news. What about me? Because I had a dream too. 3 baskets on his head, birds are eating out of it. Well, he learned that meant he was going to be beheaded, and the birds will be eating his flesh in 3 days. That wasn't a great thing. But it happened exactly as they dreamed. You know what, God was involved with that? But he interpreted that dream, but he tells him, remember me. Remember me when you're released. Because I am here and I'm in prison for something that I didn't do, and I was sold into slavery. Remember me, I don't belong in jail. That's how he was feeling at the moment. But the butler forgot him. He later on would remember him. But apparently there'll be 2 more years for this young man to be in prison dealing with that. You do good for somebody and they sit there and forget you. No, the Bible doesn't say he did that, but I wouldn't blame him. Would you? If you're just looking at the snapshots of my life, as we look at the snapshots of his life, we said, man, I can't see God in that at all. Because you're distracted. You need to be focused on the sovereignty of God. Because God meant it for good. And from this point onward, we find things turning to Joseph's favor, where he becomes one that is in power. He has the wisdom of God, and there's going to be the famine that comes. And it will be involved in providing food for his family. The brothers would come, and then they would go back again, come back again. But in the end, God meant it for good to save lives. But Joseph suffered a lot. And the only way that we could get through that is to put that in our lives. God meant it for good. God is in control of every facet of our life. He lets us make decisions. He lets people make bad decisions. But he's not just overcoming things. This is his plan. This is what he planned for every step of the way. Jealousy? You know, you think about what was miraculous. God doing something had to be miraculous. He used jealousy of brothers against one another to start it all out with. Everybody's got an idea how we ought to handle Joseph. Don't kill him, let's kill him. I'll release him. And God just lets them play it out, but he's in control. Eventually brings favor to a man in prison, his man in prison, and brings him to the power that he is. God's in control. Sometimes I fear we look at snapshots of our life and bemoan the fact, where are you, God? And I don't want us to do that. I want us to remain focused at all times, because he allows us to take the next breath. He's just not watching us. He has the power to act. So when we think about the sovereignty of God, I want to close. If you turn your Bibles to the 11th Psalm, I think we can see this is how we ought to be looking and focused upon God. And the lesson will be yours. Because this is a great psalm of saying, well, here's calamity that happens, and we have our different distractions. And I'm not saying they're not serious. I'm not saying they don't not grab your attention. You need to act and react to it. I'm not teaching that. I'm saying, what's your focus? That you can look beyond that and see God's in control. I would just do something. What do you want to do? Well, number one, I'll take refuge in Jehovah. That's where I will go to find solace. That's where I will go to find strength. That's where I'll go to hide from all the distractions. Just to get away. Be with my God alone. Study my Bible. Pray to him. And realize that that's my escape. Everything else is noise. I can't do anything about it. But I can take the step. I'll just take refuge in God. I don't know if you've had experience, but some of the best times in my life lately is just turn it all off. Turn this on. And start thinking the thoughts of God. Taking them in its context. and applying it in my imperfect life, I will take refuge in God. Well, what is he doing? Wonder if the foundations be destroyed. My life is upside down. My world's upside down. Wonder if the foundations be destroyed. What will I do? Read with me in verse 3. If the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Well, that's the question. Answer it. Okay. Jehovah is in his holy temple. Jehovah, his throne is in heaven. His eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. Okay, I'll be watching you. I'll see what you're doing, but I don't have any control over things. That's not God. Jehovah trieth the righteous. God, I wish you'd try the unrighteous. No, he tries the righteous. He's in the storms, the virus, the elections. He's in control of it all. And he will try the righteous. So I will remain righteous. Why? Because God is in control of everything. He is still ruling from heaven. He's on his throne. He hasn't abdicated that throne to anybody else. Satan, you, me, governments, everything's working out according to his plan. I'm going to sit back and watch it. Live it. Live how? Righteously. I'll remain righteous. That's what I'll do, because you know at the end, in verse 7, for Jehovah is righteous. I want to be in tune with him who has all sovereignty over everything. He's righteous. He loves righteousness. And the upright shall behold his face. We'll see him. We'll see him when things unfold and realize, oh, as Joseph did, you meant it for evil. God meant it for good. And in the end, he triumphs always. I want to be on his side of history. And the only way I can do that is through Jesus Christ. Because my righteousness won't work. Me starting to do righteousness won't work. I've got to come to find my righteousness in Jesus Christ. And when we think of the fact of God's in control, that's his plan for us. So we can take refuge in him as righteous people, but hurting people. Our foundations are destroyed. What are we going to do? I know that God is acting. He's trying. He's testing. But God, I'm going to stay focused on what? This morning, I hope we'll stay focused on the sovereignty of God and never take our eyes off of him, because he's involved in all facets of our life, even the breath we take. And he gives life and he takes it away. But he does that out of righteousness, and his plans are always going to be working. He will always triumph. Why not get right with God this morning? If you're outside of Christ, why don't you come to Christ? Some of you know what to do to be saved. You need to take that step. Focus. Wonder if I have a problem. I wonder if I don't see tomorrow. And we can be young or old. We've got to be ready for it. Why don't you stay focused right now and obey the gospel? Let us baptize you into Christ and make things right with God as we stand and as we sing.